Welcome to Season 4 of the Agile Brand with Craig Kilstrom, where we discuss business agility through customer experience, employee experience, and digital transformation. I'm your host, Craig Kilstrom. The Agile World podcast is brought to you by TEKsystems, an industry leader in full-stack technology services, talent services, and real-world application. For more information, go to teksystems.com. To read more about the topics discussed on this show, you can go to my website at gregkilstrom.com and read my latest articles or get a copy of my latest book, Meaningful Measurement of the Customer Experience, now available on Amazon and other retailers. My name is Craig Kilstrom, and I'm the host of the Agile Brand podcast. Today we're going to talk about setting boundaries and expectations during the sales cycle to prevent poor performance or disappointment down the line. To help me discuss this topic, I'd like to welcome Craig Colby, president of OneStream Software. Craig, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Greg. I'm so glad to be with you today.
Yeah, really looking forward to talking about this with you. So why don't you start by giving a little background on both yourself as well as your role at OneStream Software?
Awesome. So I'm the president. I'm actually one of the founders of OneStream. And it's always important to say there'd be no OneStream if there wasn't a company called Upstream. So I was a founder and I ran that company for a while. It was actually acquired by a legacy vendor back in 2005, but we learned a lot from that company. And, OneStream is really dedicated to solving the problem for financial consolidation, reporting, planning for some of the largest, most sophisticated organizations in the world. And I run all things that are both go-to-market and customer success driven. So sales, marketing, alliances, but also services areas of OneStream to ensure the success of the client.
Great. Well, so we're here to talk about managing customer expectations during the sales process so it optimizes outcomes for everyone involved. Can you first maybe describe this challenge and what are some of the potential outcomes are when the customer is promised something unrealistic during the sales process?
Well, one of the reasons that I sort of own it all, Greg, at OneStream is to have that sort of single voice. And my experience tells me that setting expectations improperly is a recipe for disaster. And it can solve so many, it can bring so many more problems than it solves.
Yeah.
It's just, you're asking for pain. You're asking for a conversation with the executive sponsor. And that's something you never want to have, right? You never want to have that conversation with the customer where things have gone off the rails. And typically, the number one reason that I see where things go off the rails is when someone has an expectation that was unrealistic on the project. It was not set correctly on the upfront. And what that means is you're going to have bumps and you're going to have an unhappy customer. Ultimately, you know this, Greg, customers talk, right? People talk.
Yeah.
And they move from, they might be at one of your customers, they might be going to one of your prospects. So to me, it's a recipe for not having long-term success. And, I like to break it up into short-term and long-term. And if you're not playing the long game, you're in trouble. You're going to have a lot of bumps, and ultimately it's going to come back and haunt you. That's what we all want to avoid, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I've certainly lived through this. I think sometimes it's not always something nefarious. Even sometimes it's just not jumping in, and the salesperson saying no, that's not correct. So it's sort of omission sometimes, or it's not even necessarily an intentional thing, but this seems like a pretty obvious thing to avoid overall. But why do companies continue to do this and allow it, and maybe even not train for it?
Yeah. So you said something really important right there, Greg, and that's train for it. It starts with the culture, so you have to train for it, right? And if you're not starting there, if the very first thing that the people who represent your company, your sales team, your account managers, your customer success team, if the very first thing they hear isn't that, hey, your goal is to set expectations properly, you have you have a problem right there, right? It has to be part of the culture. It can't be an afterthought. It has to be from day one. Hey, this is how we're going to represent our organization. When we bring in new people to that organization, Greg, we always say they have to take a shower from their previous vendor. We call it, whatever the legacy vendor, insert legacy vendor name here. You need to take your legacy vendor shower before you come to training.
Yeah.
And forget all the things that you heard before, because many of these organizations, they have the marketing name. So the representatives kind of will do anything for the sale because the business is going to survive, right?
Right.
Because they're already so large, they're already at such a large scale that they don't always play that long game. They're in it for the short game, for the quick hit, and that account might be taken away from them next year. Right. So it starts from a basis of trust and getting everyone to buy in that it's in your best interest as a rep to set expectations properly so that you can be more successful with your next prospect, and the other rep, sitting right next to you, they can be more successful as well, and they can build off your success and you can build off their success. With the customer. And it really starts from day one. It starts with the training. It starts with the culture. It is a top down type of mentality that has to be driven into the customer success and the account management team.
Yeah. And I want to dive a little bit more into the culture aspect in a minute, but first I want to kind of flip it and, talk about from the customer standpoint. And, customers don't always know what they don't know. But what are some red flags that a customer should look out for from a company that, whose sales team might be over promising and potentially under deliver?
Yeah, it's a phenomenal question. And it's something we challenge customers all the time on. And really, it comes down to every company, Greg, this, every company can give you 3 references.
Right, exactly. There's always at least 3 people that will say something nice about anyone, I think.
I don't know if they took them golfing or they had a nice dinner or, I don't know what it is. Every company has 3. It's like the magic number. They've got their go-to 3 people that'll talk fondly at that company. This is what we recommend. Ask for 5. Throw those out and ask for 5 more.
Interesting.
Better yet, why can't I talk to any of your customers?
Right.
So we actually give a name and a number for every single customer we have, Greg.
Wow.
That's what we do at OneStream. Why? Well, we know that's to our advantage. I wouldn't do it if it wasn't to my advantage. We have had customers. I have had prospects that have called over 100 of our customers.
Oh, wow.
And what they say overwhelmingly is, well, you're not perfect, but man, do your customers love you. And there's no such thing as perfect. And that's sort of the expectation setting, right? Especially when you're selling a software or a service. Have you ever heard of a perfect software or a perfect project?
No.
Is there such a thing? There really isn't. And so trying to set that expectation is not realistic. The expectation is there'll be a couple bumps and we're going to work through them as partners and get to the other side, and they're all okay. So the biggest red flag, and we hear this all the time, well, yeah, we're still waiting on your competitors' references. We've been waiting for weeks. Well, take the first batch of them, throw them away, ask for 5 or 10 more. They say they have thousands of customers, right?
Right.
They just told you there's 1,000. Why can't they get 10?
Yeah.
Why is 20 hard? Well, we give you 1,000 plus. And that's our sort of our testament. And we're not perfect. And all of those customers would like something, to be improved in the software. Of course, something can always be a little bit easier to do. Of course it can. That's reasonable. But we do what we say and we say what we do. We underpromise, we overdeliver, and we deliver success. And that's what it comes down to. But that's the first red flag. If you can, really dive into the references and find out who's doing what you're looking to do and doing it successfully and glows about it, you're going to get a lot of confidence in your purchase.
That's great. That's great. Well, yeah. One more thing along the lines of from the customer angle. Salespeople, in my experience, and I've done plenty of selling in my life, and still do many times. But you know, generally, you hate to say no to a customer, right? And it's tough because you're afraid somebody may say yes to the same request. But in your experience, how can telling a customer no still lead to a positive outcome for everybody, customer and all?
Yeah, so it's the most important word to say when you need to say it,
Yeah,
because that's your credibility.
yeah,
How can you be a trusted advisor to the organization? And you are a sales rep, and they know you're a sales rep, by the way,
right,
right?
right,
They know your job is to sell the business, but I promise you your job is so much easier if they can switch their mentality to the fact that you're a trusted advisor and you're there in their best interest. And very often, and I say this all the time to my teams, very often, surprisingly enough, Greg, customers don't really know what they want. They think they know, but they don't
yeah, yeah,
because they haven't done it yet. They don't really know what they're asking for. And so you have to educate. You have to be a teacher as much as anything. You have to be an educator on, hey, I hear you. No and why. Why is it no? And by the way, I hear, what business outcome are you really looking for? And is there another way or a better way to solve for that? Typically there is, and typically your solution will probably do it, but you're afraid to say no to the way they want. They're telling you they want to
yeah,
do it because they're the customer. But to me, no is really the first level of credibility that you can gain. And we've had that feedback from customers over the years. Hey, you were the only ones that said no. You were the only ones that pushed back and challenged us on this and made us
yeah.
think about it in a different way. And it's an opportunity for you to gain credibility with that customer. It's a powerful word, but it needs to be backed up by why, no, and why, not just no, and what can we be thinking about differently. Do you agree with that? I mean, you've had,
Yeah,
right?
totally. Yeah, yeah. I mean, definitely a fan of the consultative approach, and yeah, even if it turns out that it's not the right fit, I mean, wouldn't you rather have a happy customer that comes back another time when it is the right fit versus someone that's unhappy from the start? I mean, maybe this is a good segue to going back to kind of the culture and
100%. They're going to go away anyway,
right.
right? If they're unhappy, they're not going to be your customer anyway, and they might tell four other people that they were unhappy.
Yeah,
It cost you four other customers. It's not worth it.
right. Yeah, and so yeah, going back to that culture piece that you were touching on earlier. What can leaders do to? I mean, I'd be hard pressed to find a sales organization that doesn't have quotas of some sort and expectations and everything like that. So getting rid of those is not necessarily the answer. But what do leaders do to discourage this behavior overall?
Yeah, so it comes back to accountability. So if a leader starts to see a behavior in a rep that is not uh, it's not working well for the business, right? So if a rep, I'll call it rogue, if they're rogue and
Yeah,
they're not really applying the culture of the company, which is the long game. They're not doing the company. They might get a couple sales, but they're not doing the company any good service, right? Because those sales are going to go away,
yeah,
and that stuff really can be corrected very quickly. And when I call it bad behavior, right? When you see bad behavior, it either needs to change immediately, or that individual is not capable
yeah, yeah.
of not having bad behavior, and they need to move on
Right.
to another organization where they're a better fit. But you said something earlier, if they're not a good fit, I mean, it's a problem from day one. It's a stress on the organization. It's going to be a stress on the support partner, right? Who's ever trying to, it's going to be a stress on you
Yeah.
personally. Who wants to sell something to someone and have them mad at them?
Right, right.
You just don't. So culture is everything, and having a sales culture where people are really teammates, and you try to develop a team atmosphere, which means what you do affects someone else. The way you have conducted yourself has an effect on your counterpart out there. If you sell a really good piece of business, you've set expectations perfectly, and you deliver a success at one of the largest companies in the world, and they scream to the rooftops about it, guess what? That has a positive effect on the guy next to you. And if they do the same thing again for you, that has a positive effect on you. So it's about playing for the team. It's about acting as a team, as a sales team,
Yeah.
which means that you're all working towards a common goal, which is that customer success, setting expectations properly, under promise, over deliver, and set the customer up for a positive experience with your organization. That's what you can do. But it does start with the top. It starts with the leadership. Is the leadership sales at all costs?
Yeah.
Hey, Greg, do you have to make the quarter? What happens if you don't? You know what? It's such a tough message, but we'll all live. We'll all live, but we won't live if we make our quarter and we just sold 3 bad
Right.
customers
Right.
that we shouldn't have sold. Then we won't live. We won't see another day. It'll come back and haunt us a
Right.
year, 2,
Right.
3 years down the road.
Yeah.
It'll come back and get you.
Yeah. Well, then, along those lines, then, are there tricks? Then there's quotas and there's sales figures, but whatever time increment you measure them by. But are there other metrics that can be used, like customer lifetime or satisfaction or things like that, that can be part of the sales team's measurements of success? In other words, instead of just making sales, since again there tends to be some conflict of interest there, right?
There absolutely are. So, one of the measures we use is how quick to referenceability was your customer.
Nice.
How quick to referenceability are they, and what did it take to get them there? There are some customers say, "Hey, we can't be on your list, Craig, until we're live," and that's fair, right? That's a fair
Yeah.
ask.
Yeah.
Well, if you're a rep and the customer went live, they're a live customer, their checkbox, they automatically go on the list. If they, for some reason, ask not to be on that list, that's a red flag,
Yeah.
right? So that's one of the ones that we use, is that time to referenceability, that time to, based on what they said in the contract, they'll go on your list at live. If they don't, that's a problem. Then there's work to be done there. We've either made a bad sale, or we had some bumps, and that's okay, and we just needed to get through them.
Yeah.
Most of the stuff is are things you can get through. You have to be accountable towards that customer success. So we actually go through that in what we call our QBRs, where we're doing our quarterly business rules. They come up with their customers and they say, yeah, these are all my customers, and here's their status. So that is a standard part of the QBR, is the customer status.
Yeah.
And they better be referenceable. And if they're not, if I'm in the QBR, there's a conversation that's going to be had of why, what happened, and they need to be held accountable to that.
Yeah. Well, you kind of touched on this already, but wanted to circle back to something else as well. That whole concept of saying no, and how would you coach a sales leader to make it okay, or give some alternatives to using the word no, or make it more palatable? And what advice would you give to someone that needs to coach a team on obviously wanting to make a sale, but sometimes the sale is, to your point earlier, sometimes the sale isn't even a good idea for anyone involved. So, what advice would you have to somebody that's coaching in that regard?
Yeah, so I have some very specific examples.
Yeah.
Greg, we've actually sold 30 customers that originally bought another solution, where we lost the deal up front and they came back to us. So that's how I actually coach them. I say, listen, they're your customer. If you presented it properly, if we really have the right solution for them, they're your customer. They might not be your customer this year, but maybe next year.
Right.
because they're not going to be successful with their current project. They're not. We know it. We know what they're asking for. What they've deemed to be a requirement is not going to be achievable in the way they think it will be. And so they're going to be dissatisfied. In building that credibility of saying no, explaining why, and very softly saying, listen, we're going to keep in touch. Like, we aren't going to do that, but we're going to keep in touch because we think you're going to learn that you actually might suffer more than you benefit. And we wish you the best, but we're here. and we're here to guide you when you come back. And so again, no is credibility. No is your trusted advisor status. And very often, no is the reason they will come back to you and say, you guys were the only ones that said no. You explained why, and you were right. We should have been thinking differently about this. And that's all you can do.
Yeah.
And it comes down to the long game or the short game. It really does. Are you playing the long game or are you playing the short game?
Yeah, I love that philosophy, and yeah, it's it definitely in my experience it pays off as well. So that's great to hear. Well, one last question before we wrap up here, just more broadly, even as we're thinking about sales and sales success and customer success, what's one piece of advice you'd have for sales leaders, as they navigate the months ahead with, you name it, shifting economy, shifting customer expectations, all of the above, what's one piece of advice you'd have for them?
Yeah. And it comes back to the same thing that I've sort of been consistent on, which is play the long game.
Yeah.
So when the economy shifts, what we often see is you don't necessarily lose the deal, but they do push. The sales cycle tends to elongate. They're really, unless you're really into doing what I call unnatural acts, hey, we'll give it to you for half the price. I call those unnatural acts. Those unnatural acts can really come back and hurt the long game.
Right. Because
the expectation then the next time is for you to repeat that behavior. So my advice is always, the economy is the economy. Deals will push. Now you do want to get deals off the table, but you do not want to do it with unnatural acts. You want to do them. Yeah. They want to come off the table naturally. I always say, if you're engaged in unnatural acts, you're most likely in trouble. Because they will expect that behavior again. And as we all know, economies cycle, and after they go soft on us, they usually snap back pretty good. We didn't sell anything during COVID, Greg. Like, people weren't signing contracts, but 2 quarters of almost nothing, and we still were 110% of our plan for the year. We made it all up and then some. Yeah. If you asked me at the start of COVID if we were going to make our number that year, I would have said, heck no. We have no chance, right? We need to reset expectations with all of our business partners. We have no chance of making that number. But the snapback was so hard because the demand was still there. We still had activity. Yeah. So I guess my advice is keep up the activity, do all the things you're supposed to do, and the sales will take care of themselves. Wow. Do the right things. The sales will take care of themselves. They will come back, and maybe it's a tough year for the team, but next year, we're going to be winning. You do the right things, good things will happen. Karma's a bitch, isn't it, Greg?
Right. Yeah, no, I like that advice.
Yep.
Well, Craig, thanks so much for joining. For those listening, what's the best way for them to keep up with what you and OneStream are doing?
Oh, www.onestreamsoftware.com. And I think we have, and I know we have www.onestream.com now. And we are all over LinkedIn, social media channels, Twitter, etc. But that's the best way to keep informed is to follow us on LinkedIn or hit our website. And OneStream is growing like crazy. We are a true disruptor, and it's really fun to be a disruptor because you're doing something truly different in the industry. You have a unique and powerful competitive advantage, and so it's a real fun place to be. We do say no, but we get to say yes a lot too because we have a powerful solution. So
yeah, that's wonderful. Well, again, I'd like to thank Craig Colby, president of OneStream Software, for joining the show. Thanks for listening to The Agile Brand with Craig Kilstrom. Talk with you next week. Thanks again for listening to the Agile Brand with Craig Kilstrom podcast, brought to you by Tech Systems. If you enjoyed the show, please take a minute to subscribe on your podcast channel of choice and leave us a rating so that others can find the show more easily. You can access more episodes of the show at www.theagilebrand.show. To get a copy of my latest book, Meaningful Measurement of the Customer Experience, visit my website at gregkilstrom.com. Until next week, stay agile.